Did you know that Kings Island once had a Ferris wheel? But it wasn't your everyday Ferris wheel. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that is who we care about.
So, Don, the Zodiac. Um, just describe it to me. Like I never got to ride it or anything. So,
Well, it was located in originally called Coney Island, now Coney Mall, but it was a double-armed Ferris wheel. The unique design allowed one of its two wheels to load passengers at the ground level while the other rotated high above. Very colorful.
yeah, and it looks like it's like the old school containers where it's like you're in like a little hamster cage from the photos alone. But it
That
opened.
or like a little, we can say Tweety bird cage.
Yeah,
Now
yeah, that's
now we
true.
can say that. Yeah, now we can say that. But it opened in 1975, and it was a big deal when it opened that year. Closed in 1986. We mentioned that it was in the Coney Mall area, back right now where you would have, Kings Mills Antique Autos
Yes.
located there. Former names, the Giant Double Wheel is what it debuted as in 1975. It was manufactured by Wagner Bureau. It was brokered by Intamin, and at its high point, you were at 135 feet. Now, when this debuted in 1975 at Kings Island, only the Eiffel Tower took you higher than this did. The vehicles, there were 12 circular cages on each arm, and just a fun ride. From what I remember, wasn't something I rode every visit, but it was interesting. You got some good views of the park. Back then you weren't going up on rides like Diamondback and Orion and Drop Tower and getting those views of the surrounding area. So this ride gave you those opportunities as well.
So I have many questions about this. So first of all, was this a thrill ride or more of like a scenic ride?
It was more of a scenic ride, family type ride. I didn't, it was like riding the Ferris wheel, at any other park. When you have some of those parks have the giant, wheel. It was just similar to that. It wasn't anything that was like super thrilling, but it was fun. Got some nice views, and it was a change of pace kind of ride.
Yeah. So describe the cycle to me. So it's each arm had a Ferris wheel. So that was spinning, and then would it rock back and forth like during the ride cycle?
No, well, you were spinning at the top, and then the one below was doing the load and the unload. And then when that one was ready to go, that one would go up, you would come down.
Oh, okay. I was always under the impression that you would load each one and then you'd spin and then it would rock. So that's not true. This was a capacity thing, not necessarily a ride element
Right,
thing.
right. And there were, times where, as the one was going up, the other one's coming down, they'd be even. And then, the other one would keep going down. So it was got decent capacity. Yeah.
Did it load like a normal Ferris wheel? Like you had to do one at a time and balance them and so on? Or did it like go flat?
It went to the ground flat.
Oh.
So you were able, like when it came down, you were able to just, walk in them.
You really just blew my mind. I mean, I knew I never really put a whole lot of thought into this ride, but I always visualized it so it would spin and it would go back and forth. But I didn't, a double Ferris wheel, it makes sense where it's you load one side and the other side is going. It's almost pretty brilliant because a Ferris wheel is a really fun ride, but it stinks having to like, it takes forever for it to get loaded. Then it goes around a couple times and then it takes forever to get off of it. And this like solves that.
Yeah. So when it would go down, I mean, it wouldn't like, it wasn't like a big swing kind of sensation thing, but you were going down at a low pace and then you just kind of re-angled yourself to where, it kind of came down and then you got in.
Oh, that's really cool. So the Zodiac, when it was removed, it was sent to Australia, right?
Yes, Australia, where I think it was there for like 3 years.
Yes. And then where it stood is where the flight commander went. And then after that, we could do a whole episode on just the spot where the Zodiac was. So it was Zodiac, then flight commander, and then it was like the trampoline thing when they put bungee cords on you.
Yeah.
And then they had that weird thing when they put you in a hamster ball and put you on water.
Yeah. What they call
Uh,
a Euro bubble or something like that.
Yeah, Euro Bubble, that was it. And then after that, no, it was Euro Bungee. I don't know if it was Euro
Euro
Bubble
bunging.
or,
Yeah.
but and then after that, it was like supposed to be like the party pad for Dinosaurs Alive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then
It had a lot of uses there.
yeah, then it was nothing, and then it got torn out for Antique Autos, which about time, it was vacant for 10 years, and it was only kind of loosely used for the 10 or so years
Yeah.
before
Now, one of the
that.
things, Ryan, that made it a really big deal when it opened in 1975, along with another ride that year, Troika, which is now known as Shake, Rattle, and Roll.
Hmm.
It was the second ride of its kind. The first was installed at Hershey Park, Pennsylvania, 2 years earlier, 1973.
I assume the Hershey Park one isn't still there, right?
Top of my head, I don't know.
That would be a
I don't
long ride.
remember seeing it when I was there last year. I don't remember seeing it.
I think this would have stuck out like a sore thumb to you if it was still
Yeah.
there.
Now, the early promotional photos of this, when they announced the ride and what they had sent out to the media with the press release, were photos from the one at Hershey Park. Parks would work with each other and share assets back then.
Yeah. Well, I remember as recently as like 2004 when like Kings Island was they put in what's now Mondu Monsoon. It was Tasmanian Typhoon at the time. And they had these photos, but the colors were wrong. And the photos were from Holiday World.
Right.
Yeah, so that's not completely unheard of, but I guess with how big the chains are now, you don't really have to do that because there probably is an example somewhere else. But so a lot of people think that Intamin manufactured this. They did not. They brokered it. The Austrian company Wagner Bira actually manufactured it with Intamin acting as the broker. Now, you said that the Eiffel Tower also had an arrangement like that too. I always thought Intamin manufactured the Eiffel Tower. I knew it was made at Claremont Steel, or what's now known as Claremont Steel.
Yeah, it was a
But
similar arrangement to the Eiffel Tower that they
so
had.
I was talking to a very prominent Acer. I'm not going to completely dox it, but their name's Dave, and they were telling me that right like in the late 70s or so, Intamin had bought out a company, and that's how they got into the manufacturing business. So I'm guessing that their foot in the door was that they brokered all these deals. They brokered these things and then manufactured them, because Intamin, if I recall, I mean, I don't really look at Intamin's website every day, but they had Eiffel Tower. They called it the Paris Lattice Tower was the model, still on their website. So maybe they came up with it, conceptualized it, but as far as manufacturing is concerned, that was so far out of their hands that they can't really say that they manufactured it.
Yeah. So after it left Kings Island, it was about 3 years before it actually went back in operation. So when it was at Australia's Wonderland in operation, that was from 1989 to 2004. So it had a nice run there.
Yeah, and after 2004, it was reportedly stored at Sunway Lagoon Park in Malaysia. I wonder if it's still there.
We'll have to check into that.
I know we'll have to check.
But I do like the nod, though, that the Kings Mills Antique Autos gives to it. They've got that gas station name, Zodiac Refining Company. So I like that nod.
I do too. And it's such a cool name, Zodiac. Why did they change the name? They seem like they did that rather often back in the day. They went from double wheel.
I don't know why they would have. I think, just to give it something that was, different than the off the shelf name that they all went by. Like Troika, that's what they were known as. So they wanted to give it their own identities.
So that was both of them then. They were both installed, Troika and the double Ferris.
And then they were both given different names.
That's so weird.
After they opened.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder if there was like some sort of change in leadership, or like, we're not going to do this, guys. Come up with something better, because they had like as long as they were working on this deal to come up with the name. Now, you and I have discussed at length how difficult it is to come up with names sometimes for rides, but I feel like, I don't know, was there? I mean, those rides aren't too terribly far apart from each other, but did Coney Mall go through some sort of rebranding or something at the time?
In 86 it did, but that was, long after the names had been changed.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's just such a fascinating ride. I learned something. That's why I love these historical episodes, Don, because sometimes you tell me stuff about rides that I thought I knew, but I did not. But um, Don, okay, enough about old rides you can't do. Something you can do is get a Tower Topics T-shirt.
You can, and a number of fans of the show have purchased their Tower Topics t-shirt. It comes in a North Carolina blue color, available in whatever size you may need. Just $22. That includes shipping. And if you're interested in one, just drop us a message on our X. It is Tower_Topics. Let us know what size you need. Give us your mailing address, and we'll send you the QR code to make the purchase through Venmo. And once that transaction is done, you'll receive it within a matter of days.
Yeah, and I know we've told this story a couple times now, but I want to tell it again because our shirts are now international.
They
So
are.
yeah, so there's an ACE event going on in, was it Holland? Is that what you said?
It's a European trip, and one of the
Right.
parks they were at was in Holland, and we were sent a picture of an ACE member wearing the Tower Topic shirt. And it was really cool to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. I really do appreciate it, and I do see him around the park almost every visit now, and that's
Yes,
super
I've
flattering.
seen him at Meyer. I've seen him at a Reds game. I've obviously seen him at Kings Island. People have shared photos with us of them wearing them, at their house, cutting grass, whatever it might be. But like I said, it's a great logo that you designed, Ryan, I think, and it really pops on that North Carolina blue color shirt.
Yeah, it turned out really well. And if you have a Tower Topics T-shirt, send us a photo of you wearing it, and we'll tweet it out or something. So that'll be really fun. But we will be right back with the listener questions. Okay, first listener question: Jacob does everything. Jackson, Ohio. Why do you think Paramount Theater Encore? I'm sorry, Phantom Theater Encore. I don't know why I read that wrong. Paramount Theater Encore is the former name of the theater where this took place, but nonetheless, Jacob, why do you think Phantom Theater Encore was not brought back for a third season? Could you see it coming back to Kings Island at all after this year? It's a
Well, I
good
think there's a
question.
couple of reasons why it wasn't brought back. One I would say is, budgetary reasons. The show had a pretty decent run.
Mhm.
What was it, the first week of June through daily operations ending, so
Yeah.
a longer run than what you see this year with the Gazillion Bubble show.
Mhm.
So that would be one of the reasons. And I think number two, it had been there for 2 years, and historically Kings Island has not brought back the same show more than a couple of years. You can get away with shows that are like staples at places like Disney and Universal. Dollywood can have longer runs with certain shows and that. But I think that would be part of the thinking too. I'm not there anymore, so I can't say what the exact reason was, but I would think that would be some of the thinking is, if we did this again for the third year and had the same kind of run, would we get the same kind of attendance for the show? So you have to be thinking about that too. With Kings Island being such a heavily populated season pass park, that plays into it too, where if you're getting a high percentage of pass holders every day, how often are they going to watch the show? Now it does have its fans who would
Mhm.
watch it every visit, but maybe not enough of them. So you have to factor things like that into it also. Is it sustainable for a third year? Now, could it come back at some point? Terrific show. We don't want to say never. There have been similar type shows that have come back, with the same, thing. Maybe they might change a different name, put a different name on it or something. We've seen some of the country shows or the pop shows where it's the same thing, just a different name. So it has come back before. But I don't know. I mean, I think it was really well done. They really the cast was phenomenal. That's another thing. Can you cast it to make it
Mhm.
work? So I don't know, but I think it was part of the 50th anniversary. It was so popular they did bring it back for that second year. But I don't know. I'd love to see it come back, but I'd probably one of those people that are in the minority who would watch it every visit, and not enough for people like me, I think.
There's the law of diminishing returns where you bring it in and there's a lot of buzz, and then you bring it back for a spectacular return, and people are happy about it, and then by the third year, it's old hat, no matter how popular it was. Um, I think that was one of the biggest factors in it. I don't want to get into the budgetary stuff because, like, let's not shop out of that basket because I don't think it would have come back a third year regardless. But as far as will it come back, I want to set the scene, Don. Because I think this is the perfect situation to bring it back, maybe even bring it back better than ever. So a couple years down the line, they decide they're going to redo the dark ride. Let's say they do decide to do Phantom Theater. That would be a really good opportunity to bring that show back,
Yeah,
to
then you
have it
would.
meet the
Yeah.
theme, and you could do it bigger and better than ever. And it's been a couple years, so it's not it's novel again.
Hmm.
I think that would be a fantastic situation to bring it back. So I wouldn't hold my breath, but I also wouldn't hold out hope. But there's also kind of a pleasure in the fact that nowadays we are getting something different rather often out of the Kings Island Theater. I mean, we got the Gazillion Bubble show. I mean, who didn't see that coming, or who had that on their bingo cards? What I meant.
Right.
Before that, Phantom Theater, and then Cirque shows. The Cirque shows were a great example. You know, all three of those shows running over the 6 years were fantastic. But I have to admit, and I answered another listener question with it. Like when they did Gravity, I was like kind of over it halfway through the show. And it wasn't that it was a bad show, it was spectacular. But I've seen all this stuff before. I've seen a Cirque show. We're on year 5 at this point. And they bring it back for another year. That's year 6 of that. So
Yeah, I think you're getting to that point too with what they got going on in the showplace, with the stunt show there, where it's a lot of similar, type stunts. It's a fantastic show this year. But, for a lot of guests, they've seen the wall climb. They've seen, coming down the ramp with the bikes and the skateboards, being up on the ring and the rope and those kind of things. So that too may be at that point where it's kind of run its course.
I think that that's absolutely true. And I'll tell you that a lot of it depends on the individual show too, because they did Nightwalkers 2 years ago. And I remember like me and my friends watched it like 2 or 3 times every time we went because it was just so good and so high energy and so exciting. Then they brought it back and they tweaked some stuff and it wasn't the same. We only
Right.
watched it once. And it was like, not only did we only watch it once, but it was so disappointing that one of my friends that I was with that was really excited about it left. Like he left for the night because he was like, yeah, I'm not feeling it anymore. Um, so yeah, I mean, if they granted like the two shows were nearly identical except for that one contracted section, with the ropes and so on, but they would have to substantially change it, and even at that, you would be running down the theme quite a bit with Phantom Theater Encore. Like even if the show is substantially different, if it was the same characters, it would feel the same. And probably most people watching it who saw it last year and then saw it this year, even if the show's not the same at all, would think that they saw the same show twice.
Right.
Or worse yet, they'd be like, "Oh, Phantom Theater, I've already seen that. I don't need to see that again." That's why it's one of the risks you run by doing the repeats and stuff. I'm glad they brought it back. I'm glad they do the shows for 2 year runs because part of that, I knew I said I didn't want to bring up the budgeting, but here we are. But they can justify a lot more development costs if they know they're going to run it for 2 years. So as if something is going to be a 1 year run, it's more tempting to just kind of throw it together. But if it's something that's 2 years or even something that's going to travel between the parks, which I think is the future of what we're seeing with this Six Flags situation, that justifies more people and more time, more equipment, that sort of stuff. So I'd like to see it come back someday. It would have to be under the right context that I described. I actually like to see the ride come back too, but great question, Jacob. I know you do everything, so I'm glad you took time to send us a listener question. Our next question is out of this is from Nasiko from Ohio. He says, "How come you guys push YouTube viewership over the other ones so much? Just curious. As I listen to your podcast on Apple Podcasts, that is how I found out about you." That's a fair question.
It's a great question, but I think especially after we switched platforms and what we're using now with StreamYard is the visuals. that we're able to offer, with the different photos, and we've been able to drop in, video of, things that we're seeing around the park, and so that's the main reason to push YouTube, is just because of the visual opportunities that we have. But the other channels, they're all important. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. I mean, they're all important to us, and all have that equal value. Because everyone's going to be listening different, especially if you're driving. A lot of times I hear, fans of the show listen to it on the way to and from work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, every platform or every place where you get your podcast, it's important to us.
Yeah, from a marketing standpoint too, and I put a lot of thought into this. First of all, the audience has taught us that YouTube is their preferred platform. In fact, when we first started, I was really trying to grow the audio part first, because there's so many avenues. There's Apple, Google, Spotify, as I list off all those when we do attractions group. But it seemed like people were always attracted to YouTube, and then obviously I'm the one that goes around and I post our new episodes, and the season pass group, and uncensored after dark, and connoisseur, all the different Kings Island groups. What I used to do up until recently is post the link tree, and the link tree, for those of you who don't know, is you click on it, it brings up this thing, and it's like, oh, if you're Apple, click this; if you're Google, click this; if you're Spotify, click this; if you're YouTube, click this. And what I've come to find is that adding that extra step is not helpful. If someone's looking at their phone and they want to listen to Tower Topics or Attractions Group podcast, it's just far more convenient for me to just drop a link to YouTube, and then they can just hit play right there in their feed and start watching it. So that's my main thing as to why I did it. But you're right. We've done a lot of work with with using StreamYard, which is our new service, which is why this looks better than it did. And I'm using Blender to create 3D stuff, and we're very proud of that. I mean, I guess that's kind of a selfish explanation, but it is what it is. But I would say, honestly, like I would encourage people to watch YouTube if I had to choose. We're never going to stop putting it on the audio podcast unless something substantially changes, in the landscape of things. But YouTube is the way to go. It's where we reach people the most, and where we have the most interactivity, and so on. So that's, in the nutshell, why we push the YouTube. I feel like we just gave away all our trade secrets, Don.
No, like I said, they're all important, but you're right. I mean, just what we can do with YouTube and the visuals, and by showing the pictures, and that helps. If you're watching and we're talking about something, we can help better paint the picture of what we're talking about.
Well, also it's kind of like, I love podcast. I listen to podcasts every day, and one thing that I've noticed, there's one that I listen to where you have to be a subscriber to like watch the video version, but the audio version's free. And the person always has to, the host always has to stop and be like, all right, for audio listeners, you have to imagine this or whatever. And I kind of catch us doing that. And it's like, it's one thing to like feel like you're on a phone conversation with me and Don when we talk about stuff, but I feel like you get a much better experience if it's like we're all sitting at a Denny's and Don showing us photos, and we're talking about the Zodiac or the train or whatever. I just think that that's ultimately going to yield a better experience. So
it does.
That's why I lean towards that. But that is a fair question. And honestly, if you or anybody else feels like we're neglecting the podcasts and the podcast side of things in any way, I don't think that's what you're implying. But if you have recommendations for improvement, we're always open for it. Drop us a comment. Appreciate it. Cool. All right. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.